I make videos like this annoyingly frequently, but just hear me out. So, you all already are aware that I am an avid gun owner. Okay, that sounded wrong. I am a gun owner and an avid gun own supporter. That doesn't make any more sense. Basically, I believe that everyone should have what's known as the constitutional carry. If you are legally old enough to buy a gun, you are legally automatically allowed to carry it. You should not be required to have a permit. You should not be required to have a Ford card. Though in some states, like for example, Indiana, I got a Ford card. Didn't have to pay for it. I got a Ford card because I wanted insurance. Okay, swell. You didn't, it was not a requirement though. And that's the thing. States like Illinois, California, New York, New Jersey, and some other ones, those are just the more famous ones, uphold the idea that the states are allowed to set laws that just blatantly go against the Constitution. Well, here's the problem. If you use a few smidgens of a very, very, very unnormal, and yes, that's not a very correct terminology, but if you use a smidgen of a concept that's very much not normal anymore, you would immediately be able to piece together concepts that lower courts and apparently sometimes the Supreme Court just doesn't seem to be able to grasp. For example, you ever heard of a dictionary? Well, whenever a word isn't used in the everyday lexicon, which by the way, that's another one of those that you would have to look up. Lexicon just means the list of words that are in use. So when a word is not in the everyday lexicon, meaning when it's not in everyday use, the way you figure out what that word means, if it does pop up, is go look it up in a dictionary. Okay, swell. Why am I bringing that up? Well, simple. What the ding dong is a militia? The Supreme Court has already ruled that you cannot define the meat of a constitutional right by a preliminary statement, but people still do it all the time. A well-regulated, and then they ignore the militia, just well-regulated. Therefore, the phrase shall not be infringed is meaningless. Okay, you know how I was commenting on this weird concept that is basically unheard of nowadays? Yeah, I was referring to common sense. Common sense isn't so common anymore because nobody knows how to use their brain. Do you really think that people who knew how to speak Latin would write something that contradicts the second half of the sentence? The phrase shall not be infringed. Do you really think that shall not be infringed is neutralized by well-regulated militia? Really? And that's only the first point that I'm trying to bring up. So here's the thing. If you look up, if you just bother to look up what militia is, it's the original word that we, for some odd reason, changed to mean the modern day military. And yes, I said modern day on purpose. The militia is what people would more readily remember as Paul Revere's Ride. No, not specifically Paul Revere's Ride, but you know what I mean. Paul Revere rode through towns saying or yelling, "The British are coming." Well, why did he do that, and why is that so famous? He was alerting the militia. They're called Minutemen. He yelled, "The British are coming," which, by the way, the British meant the tyrannical monarchy government from England. The exact thing that the Declaration of Independence was saying we were free from. Anywho, so saying the British are coming was supposed to alert the everyday man who was at home in bed that we need you to get yourself dressed, grab your gun, and come be ready to fight against tyranny. Wait! If that's what the militia is, then why exactly would you restrict any gun? Well, that's only talking about muskets. Ugh. Really? Would it interest you to know that in 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was written, rifles were a thing? They were just not very well, they weren't well spread because they were difficult to make, but rifles were a thing. He who had a rifle dominated the battlefield because you had much more accuracy. Muskets were the more common, but rifles were around. When the Constitution was written, they were even more prevalent. So acting as though you're going to restrict people to what the Founding Fathers had, bring the Founding Fathers to modern age. A, they would be appalled by everything that the government does nowadays. And B, they would immediately tell you, you're trying to restrict the people's right to bear arms by saying that we only meant firearms we had at the time. Do you people have a brain? And if so, do you know how to use it? See what I mean by common sense? I mean, come on. This was 100% not around back then. But apparently, even in states that hate the Constitution, like Illinois, if you bribe them enough to give you permission to exercise your constitutional right, this is what you're carrying around. They don't restrict you to carrying around a musket pistol. No, you're allowed to carry around a semi-automatic. They just restrict you to how many bullets you can have in your gun. Which again, considering what the militia was designed to do, why would you restrict the people's number of bullets? If you're trying to fight a tyrannical government, why would you restrict the number of bullets? Oh, simple, because we don't want you to be able to fight back when we get more and more and more and more and more and more tyrannical. On the same line of thought, you've heard me make comments. Well, you didn't hear me. I wrote it in a video short. The Supremacy Clause states that any city or state law that contradicts a federal law must give precedence to the federal law. Okay. Why is that important? Well, I don't currently have one in my possession right now, but I used to own cap and ball revolvers, which are federally not a firearm. But in states like Illinois, they are. Because on the state level, the law is strict. Federally, you can buy one and have it shipped straight to your door. Illinois, you. We don't care about your life. We just want your money. So, do you see what I'm kind of getting at here? The states that restrict your right to a gun are the states that do not care about your life. They want your money. That's it. They're also the states that make you pay them to be able to exercise your constitutional right. You ever wonder why states like Indiana, where I used to live, by the way, you ever wonder why states like Indiana call it constitutional carry? Then there's stuff like, there's people who believe that you have to have a waiting period to purchase a gun. I live in one of them. Illinois has a 3-day waiting period before you can pick up a gun that you've just purchased. Does that make any sense? Think about it. 2 scenarios usually are how things end up going. First one is if somebody genuinely wants to hurt someone else, and this is what people focus on the majority of the time, is they will grab a rifle. Weird. Rifles are considered long guns. If you can find a long gun that is considered legal in Illinois, you can take those home with you the same day. Wait a minute. The thing that the people are the most scared of are the thing that you can take home with you the same day? Okay, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. California has even weirder gun laws. You are required to have a 15-day waiting period, but you can take a long gun home with you that day. I don't understand the logic here. But the reason why I'm bringing that particular point up, when I lived in Indiana, I got myself a gun because I was point blank threatened. Oh, I'm super glad I wasn't threatened when I lived in Illinois, because I would never have been able to get myself a gun and carry it. Illinois, point blank, says, I don't care if you got threatened. I don't care if you live. I don't care about your life. You're here to pay me your every penny that I can squirm out of you. That's it. Okay, fine. Then on top of that, you've heard me say this before, but every single gun law that we have to follow, the police don't. Illinois is concealed carry only. Police wear their gun on their belt. Illinois has a 15-round magazine capacity limit unless you're in places like Chicago, in which case it's a 10-round magazine capacity limit. I haven't checked what the Chicago police officer's sidearm is, but I know in Marion, their sidearm holds 17. So what you're telling me is that every single law that we have to follow, the police get a freebie pass because they've got a metal badge on? No. And by the way, if you come at me with the Constitution gives a policy for police power, and that's what every state uses to pass every regulation they want. Really? Go look it up. The police weren't even around when the Constitution was written. How in the world do you include a clause or even a word about police power when the police weren't even around to write a phrase about police power for? The police power concept was Theodore Roosevelt talking about international police power, not the Constitution. So drop the act. Do your research. An amendment of the Constitution states that the powers not delegated by the states will be reserved to the states or to the people. That is the amendment, and I put the number up on the screen for you. That's the amendment that people are improperly dubbing police power. That's not what it says, is it? They're manipulating. And by the way, the Constitution does say something on the screen now about using the Constitution in order to try to nullify part of the Constitution. So I don't grasp how anybody thinks that Illinois, California, New Jersey, New York, all these different states that ban all these different types of guns, if you just use your head, you would understand that none of this is legal. But why did they get away with it? Simple. You do the right thing, you're kicked out of office. You stand up for yourself. You're arrested as a maniac. You don't pay them money in order to exercise your right. You're illegal. Well, guess what? It shouldn't be illegal in the first place, but we apparently are too complacent to do anything about it. What do? Unfortunately, if you actually have a life, have people you care about, you can't do anything. Because you can't just disobey the law on purpose in order to bring truth to light and force them to realize, to pay attention enough so you can get your voice heard and tell them none of these laws are legal. And even if you do point it out, they're just going to go, you're fanatical, you're crazy, and they'll just drop the entire thing. Because guess what? The government's who has the money and has the power and has the influence. None of us matter. Okay. My apologies for the somewhat tense and or depressing nature of the video, but I wanted to get that out there. I will try to make a more light-hearted video shortly. So I will see you in the next video, and happy trails.